When it comes to one blue hedgehog, he's been able to capture hearts, raise eyebrows, and evoke feelings of nostalgia like no other. He's been in the public eye for more than 30 years now, but how much do you really know about Sega's speedy mascot? From his initial design and early influences to his egg-shaped enemy and his transformation from home console hero to big screen superstar.
Unstoppable.
This is the evolution of Sonic the Hedgehog. In the early 1990s, Sega was pushing for a game that would surpass 1 million units in sales. To achieve this, the team knew they needed to replace their then mascot, Alex Kidd, with someone more exciting to compete with the hugely popular Super Mario. Sega's research and development team soon got to work and presented numerous options. Among these were a wolf, a bulldog, a short mustached man in pajamas, and a rabbit who collected objects using its extendable ears. While some of these blueprints would later be used for other characters, an anthropomorphic hedgehog was chosen to be the face of the new franchise. Originally drawn with short spikes, a round body, and no visible irises, the hedgehog's look has gone through many changes over the years. His body color was changed to dark blue very early on, partly to match Sega's logo, while his red and white shoes are said to have been inspired by Santa Claus and modeled on those worn by Michael Jackson. Codenamed Mr. Hedgehog, which was mistranslated as Mr. Needlemouse by English-speaking fans, the brainchild of artist Naoto Oshima might have been named Raisupi, or LS, which stood for Lightspeed, had those suggestions stuck. But eventually the creators settled on Soniku Zahejiku, aka Sonic the Hedgehog, with the name Sonic meaning faster than the speed of sound. As for Sonic's relaxed yet confident personality, that was influenced by none other than former U.S. President Bill Clinton, who was still just a politician at the time and wouldn't actually become president until 1993. Oshima felt that Clinton had a get-it-done attitude and a sense of wanting to conquer injustice straight away. Fittingly, Sonic has gone on to save the world on many occasions, overcoming evil in its various forms. Although often that form takes on the shape of a wickedly mustached man with an egg-shaped torso. More on him later, though. With Sonic now conceptualized, a group of 15 began the task of developing the very first Sonic the Hedgehog game. Headed by lead programmer Yuji Naka, the crew would come to be known as Team Sonic. As well as giving Sonic super speed, the cocky protagonist was designed with a unique ability to roll up into a ball to attack his enemies, a trait reminiscent of an actual hedgehog's defense system. Interestingly, early Sonic concepts saw him as part of a band and having a human girlfriend called Madonna. However, Sega of America hated this notion, and after a heated debate with Sonic Team in Japan, the idea was dropped. Music would remain a key part of Sonic's success, though, with the original game's soundtrack composed by Masato Nakamura of the band Dreams Come True. Sega even sponsored the band's Wonder 3 tour, painting Sonic on the tour bus and advertising the upcoming game using pamphlets and on-stage screens showing Sonic gameplay. Arcade gamers in Japan could also catch a glimpse of Sonic by playing the racing game Rad Mobile, which came out in 1990. Technically, in Sonic's first in-game appearance, he could be seen dangling from the driver's rearview mirror as a decorative item. The inclusion was approved by Team Sonic as a way to familiarize gamers with the character before his own premiere on the Sega Mega Drive, known in the US as the Sega Genesis. Speaking of which, on June 23, 1991, the game Sonic the Hedgehog hit store shelves. A fast-paced 2D action platformer, it set the tone that Sonic the Hedgehog games would become best known for. It also introduced characters and themes that would become regulars in the long-running franchise. Taking on the role of Sonic, players were tasked with traveling through the various zones on South Island, collecting rings, gathering Chaos Emeralds, and freeing the island's animals which had been captured and made into slaves by Sonic's longtime foe, the evil Dr. Robotnik. Remember that pajama-wearing mustache man? Yeah, well, he ended up becoming the series' bad guy. For clarification, younger fans of Sonic are likely to refer to Dr. Robotnik as Dr. Eggman, which is the name that has always been used in Japan, but used widely elsewhere only since 1998. Sega of America changed his name to Dr. Ivo Robotnik in the original game manuals, allegedly without Team Sonic's consent. When Sonic Adventure came out in 1998, he was referred to by both names. And it has since been clarified that Robotnik is the Doctor's real last name, while Eggman is a common name taken after his shape. The Chaos Emeralds are mighty powerful gemstones, with enough power to sustain, destroy, or control life on Earth, depending on how they're used. So it's vital that the good-natured Sonic gets to them before the evil Dr. Robotnik uses them for his plans of world domination. The gameplay was fast and furious, with the aim to conquer a series of acts in each zone in less than 10 minutes. Completing an act with at least 50 rings granted the player access to a special stage. You had to avoid the Doctor's traps and robots, known as badniks, along the way, though, as getting hurt made you lose your rings. If you sustained damage while on 0 rings, you'd lose a life and have to restart from a checkpoint. At the end of each zone, Robotnik was there, waiting for a boss battle. Completion of special stages netted players a Chaos Emerald. Managed to collect all 6, and you'd unlock the game's big cinematic ending, which involved flowers and an infuriated Dr. Robotnik. Fail, though, and Sonic would give the gamer an angry look, and Robotnik would appear on a black screen juggling the unobtained Chaos Emeralds, with the game offering you the chance to try again. In addition to Sonic, his arch-nemesis, and the Chaos Emeralds, 7 animal friends were introduced in the original game that would later reappear in Sonic cartoons, comics, games, and merchandise. In Western Sonic lore, these animals are even believed to have taught Sonic some of his abilities. While other animals have been added over time, the original 7 are Pucky, Pecky, Picky, Pocky, Ricky, Rocky, and Flicky. Flicky had her own video arcade game in 1984, preceding Sonic by 7 years. Sonic the Hedgehog turned out to be a huge commercial success, selling well above Sega's desired 1 million units, selling over 24 million copies in total. Besides becoming one of the best-selling video games, it is also considered one of the greatest video games of all time. The game picked up Overall Game of the Year at the Golden Joystick Awards and was awarded the title Best Game of the Year by Electronic Gaming Monthly. More importantly, though, Sega had created the icon they were after and emerged as a worthy rival to Nintendo and Super Mario. The rapid speed with which players could zip through levels offered a thrill like no other. In fact, while playtesting the original version, creator Yuji Naka reportedly suffered from motion sickness because of the game's high speed. As a result, the final game had to be slowed down. Why did Sega want such a speedy start in the first place? In an issue of Nintendo Power, Naka revealed that he always tried to get through the level as fast as he could, referring to the world's 1-1 level on Super Mario Bros. This inspired the initial concept for Sonic. The arrival of Sonic also coincided with the competition between Sega's Genesis console and Nintendo's SNES system. Sega was actively promoting the faster blast processing of its Genesis, and Sonic was the perfect game to show just what it could do, famously claiming that Genesis does what Nintendo don't. A slowed-down version of Sonic the Hedgehog with some unique levels was released in November 1991 for the less capable 8-bit Sega Master System, which focused more on exploration than speed. Sales of the 8-bit version topped 9 million units. Fun fact, the first underwater Sonic stage appeared in the Labyrinth Zone and clearly established the fact that Sonic can't swim. The decision was based on a mistaken belief by Yuji Naka that all hedgehogs couldn't swim. In reality, hedgehogs are generally strong swimmers and have been observed swimming over half a mile in nature. The hotly anticipated sequel, Sonic the Hedgehog 2, came out in November 1992, 1 year after the original smash hit. Fearing a potentially disappointing follow-up, Sonic Team went all out to improve upon their original formula, as well as improving gameplay qualities. The developers created a book-length report to flesh out the game's story, characters, and levels. The setting this time around was West Side Island, and the race was once again on for the Chaos Emeralds, of which there were now 7 to collect instead of 6. Dr. Robotnik intended to use them to power his Death Egg, a huge space station not so subtly based on the Death Star from Star Wars. 10 zones and 23 acts awaited Sonic this time, with the act at the end of each zone culminating in a boss battle with Dr. Robotnik. Sonic did have a new move in his arsenal this time around to help him, the Spin Dash. It meant that he no longer needed to backtrack in order to gain momentum, something which had been viewed as a weakness in the first game. Sonic's speed cap was also lifted, meaning that the game's pace was even faster than the first. Early on, Team Sonic entertained the idea of Sonic receiving damage if he ran into walls at full speed, but that idea was dropped. The most significant change was the introduction of a new character, Miles Prower, better known as Tails. He is a fox with 2 tails who was once bullied but found courage in watching Sonic's heroics. The two became best friends, and Tails has since offered his pilot and mechanic skills to our lovable hedgehog on regular occasions. In-game, the player can control either Sonic or Tails, or both. They can also play as either character while the other is controlled by a second player or by the game's AI. Sonic and Tails have these same abilities, though the fox is several pixels smaller than Sonic and therefore may not need to duck in certain situations. As well as playing co-op, the sequel also allowed 2 players to play in a competitive mode for the first time. It involved a split-screen race across 3 levels, and players were ranked by their time, score, number of rings at the end of a level, total rings collected, and number of item boxes smashed. Players could also face off in special stages to collect the most rings. After the success of the first Sonic game, Masato Nakamura returned to provide some kick-ass tunes for the sequel. Apparently, he demanded a much higher salary this time around, which almost cost him the gig, as Sega of America ended up testing an in-house soundtrack to avoid Nakamura's higher fees. Team Sonic felt the in-house tracks were awful and made sure Nakamura was hired no matter the cost. For all of Team Sonic's hard work, they were rewarded with financial gains and critical acclaim. The game broke multiple sales records, selling 1 million copies and grossing $50 million in a single day in the United States. 2.2 million units were sold before the game was even released, and total sales surpassed 7.5 million copies. Oddly, only 400,000 of those were sold in Japan. Electronic Gaming Monthly awarded it Best Game of the Year for the Sega Mega Drive, calling it the best Genesis cart to come along in a long time. A Best Action Adventure Game award followed from Game Informer, who praised it for keeping the same look and feel of the original Sonic the Hedgehog while adding a 2-player mode, longer levels, new moves, and better animation. Again, an 8-bit version of the game was made to be playable on the Sega Master System, but it varied drastically from the 16-bit version. It was designed to be ported to the Sega Game Gear, which is why it is also known as Sonic the Hedgehog 2 GG. Combined sales of this version totaled around 3 million units. Fun fact, the level select cheat in Sonic the Hedgehog 2 can be accessed by putting the following code into the game's sound test: 19, 65, 9, 17. These numbers represent the former head of the Sonic team, Yuji Naka's birthday, September 17, 1965. With over 30 years of Sonic content to cover, there's much more on the way, so get ready for part 2. Having been in the spotlight for over 30 years now, Sonic the Hedgehog has appeared in a long list of games, as well as in countless other forms of media. In typical Sonic style, he doesn't appear to be slowing down anytime soon. We're gonna have to speed up too if we're ever gonna finish this thing. this is the evolution of Sonic the Hedgehog Part 2. Following the successful release of Sonic the Hedgehog 2 on the Sega Genesis, the titular Hedgehog began appearing in his own comic books. First, there was a Japanese manga series in the magazine Shogaku Yanensei, loosely based on the video games. It had its own unique storyline and is most notable for introducing the characters of Amy and Charmy B, who would both later appear in Sonic video games and TV series. Speaking of which, in 1992, the first episode of the animated series Adventures of Sonic the Hedgehog was released. Another TV series, simply named Sonic the Hedgehog, came on TV 1 year later. It featured a more dramatic and darker story than the Adventures series. The program aired for 2 seasons with a total of 26 episodes. Unfortunately for fans of the series, the 3rd season was canceled, ending the series with a cliffhanger.
Right.
Fleetway Editions in the UK began publishing Sonic the Comic in May 1993, while at the same time in the US, Archie Comics began production of the official Sonic the Hedgehog comic. The latter was recognized in the Guinness World Records for being the longest-running comic series based on a video game. The final issue, number 290, was released in December 2016. For a brief time in 1993, Sega even sponsored a Japanese football team. Sega also sponsored a Formula One team and a racing weekend. Fittingly, the Sega European Grand Prix at Donington Park in the UK was an exciting race, featuring a lap by Ayrton Senna, regarded by many as the greatest lap ever in an F1 car. The event culminated in Senna holding aloft a Sonic the Hedgehog trophy at the end of the race. Sonic received his own arcade game in June 1993. Developed by Sega AM3, Sega's Sonic the Hedgehog was mainly seen in Japanese arcades, although a few units made their way to the United States and Europe. The game featured 2 new playable characters alongside Sonic, namely Ray the Flying Squirrel and Mighty the Armadillo. All 3 had been kidnapped by Dr. Eggman and taken to Eggman Island. The game was an isometric platformer and allowed players to control each of the characters using a trackball for movement and a single action button for a spin jump move. The aim was to get through 6 levels as quickly as possible while avoiding traps such as spears, icicles, and flame pits. The 7th level was Eggman's Tower, from which the player would need to escape and get off the island before it self-destructed, an event caused by Dr. Eggman, of course. Electronic Gaming Monthly gave the game a 10 out of 10, praising its cinematics and hilarious character animations. The magazine declared that it shatters your perception of what a good game should be. Fun fact, on November 25th, 1993, Sonic appeared in Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade as the first ever video game character in balloon form. In fact, he would remain the only video game-inspired balloon until Pikachu in 2001. However, things didn't exactly go smoothly for Sonic. Heavy winds pushed the giant 6-story tall balloon into a lamppost, which pierced his eye at one point and caused him to deflate. Worse than that, though, the light fixture shattered and injured a man and little girl. Luckily, they weren't too badly hurt, but it was definitely not Sonic's finest hour. On September 23, 1993, Sonic made the leap from cartridge to CD, as it was released for the newly introduced Sega CD. The 2D platformer titled Sonic CD ushered in a new era and a couple of new characters. Amy Rose, a girl hedgehog with the hots for Sonic, made her debut, as did Metal Sonic, a robot version of Sonic built by Dr. Robotnik. Beginning on Sonic's home planet, the majority of the game actually takes place on the mystical Little Planet, a place of beauty and wonder that appears for 1 month a year and houses the magical time stones. These 7 gems can alter time, transforming landscapes and fixing or creating damage in an instant. Obviously, Dr. Robotnik intends to use the stones for his world domination plans, and it's up to Sonic to intervene. The pesky Amy Rose appears on Little Planet after foreseeing a meeting with Sonic and her tarot cards, but is kidnapped by Metal Sonic. Now Sonic, or the player, must rescue Amy Rose and stop the Time Stones from falling into evil hands. This time, Sonic is the only playable character, but he has another new move, the Super Peel Out. In-game, Sonic uses time warp signs to travel to the past or future and get the best possible ending. The player needs to secure good futures in each zone. Music was at the center of controversy for this title, with the North American release featuring a different soundtrack to the original and receiving some heavy criticism for it. Aside from the musical hiccup, critics worldwide tended to agree that Sonic CD was one of the best games for Sega's new console. The time travel game mechanic was seen as innovative, and the graphics were admired.
I did it.
Electronic Gaming Monthly awarded it Best Sega CD Game of 1993. 1.5 million Sonic CD copies were sold. Fun fact, hidden images and messages can be found by entering different codes into the game's sound test. If you set FM to 46, PCM to 12, and DA to 25, you are confronted by a creepy picture and Japanese writing, which roughly translates to "fun is infinite." A mistranslation of the word Majin, meaning evil spirit, made things eerier, as did the music that was played. Hence the message and image being used as a form of creepypasta since. Sonic Chaos was released in 1993 for the Sega Master System and Sega Game Gear. Developed by Aspect and published by Sega, it would be the final platform-based Sonic title for the Master System in Europe. It was very similar to Sonic the Hedgehog 2 in terms of gameplay, but featured new movesets and power-ups, such as rocket shoes and time stops. It was also the first 8-bit Sonic title where a gamer could play as Tails. Sonic Chaos pioneered the speedometer, which showed players how fast they were traveling through zones in kilometers per hour. While the game was praised for its graphics and the ability to play as Tails, some felt the game lacked challenge, and the level designs were bland. Sonic was a very busy hedgehog in 1993, as he also featured in Sonic the Hedgehog Spinball. Developed initially for the Sega Genesis, the adventure pinball game has been re-released on 11 different platforms. Consisting of 4 levels, the main aim is to create a number of Chaos Emeralds in order to advance. Once a player has collected the required amount, they enter a boss room for a boss battle. While it had the look, feel, and sound familiar to Sonic fans, critics weren't impressed by the clunky controls and physics compared to other pinball titles. Fun fact, in 2010, Alton Park opened a Sonic Spinball roller coaster with spinning cars. In 2016, the ride was rebranded to Spinball Wizard, though there are still Sonic references. The first Sonic-based spin-off game not to feature or even mention our famous blue protagonist was Dr. Robotnik's Mean Bean Machine, and debuted towards the end of 1993. A falling block puzzle game reminiscent of Tetris, it was based on the Japanese Mega Drive port of the arcade game Puyo Puyo. The visuals were altered and the music rearranged to star Sonic's arch-nemesis, Dr. Ivo Robotnik. Interestingly, this title is set amidst events in the Adventures of Sonic the Hedgehog TV series. References to the show include the opponents seen in the scenario mode, who all appeared in the show's first episode, plus Dr. Robotnik's Fortress, which can be seen in the background and in the game's ending. IGN gave the game a score of 7.5. Gaming Magazine loved it even more, giving it a 90% and declaring it the 9th best game of all time. They described it as a devilish, addictive game, which even haters of all things Sonic-related will love. A range of Sonic books and novels were published in December 1993. Puffin Books released Sonic Adventures game books titled Metal City Mayhem and Zone Rangers. Virgin Books produced novels called Sonic the Hedgehog in Robotnik's Laboratory, Sonic the Hedgehog in the Fourth Dimension, and Sonic the Hedgehog and the Silicon Warriors. Meanwhile, Kroll Associates brought out a novel simply called Sonic the Hedgehog. February 1994 when the third installment of the main Sonic games came to Sega Mega Drive or Sega Genesis. Picking up where the story of Sonic the Hedgehog 2 ended, Dr. Robotnik and his damaged Death Egg crash land on the floating Angel Island. Here we are introduced to Knuckles the Echidna for the very first time, whose job is to guard the 7 Chaos Emeralds that keep the island and its animals safe. Sonic and Tails soon arrive in their trusty tornado plane, and Sonic uses the Chaos Emeralds he had acquired previously to transform into Supersonic. However, tricked into working with Robotnik, Knuckles soon interrupts Sonic and takes the Chaos Emeralds from him. So the player, as Sonic, must get them back and once again prevent Dr. Robotnik from getting his hands on any of those magic gems. In Sonic 3, gamers take charge of Sonic or Tails and can also play as Knuckles, but only in competition mode, which is based on the two-player versus mode from the previous title. In October 1994, a continuation of the story was released titled Sonic and Knuckles. It was actually part of the same game, but since it was not finished on time, it was split into two and released separately. Essentially, gamers could combine Sonic and Knuckles with Sonic 3 to make Sonic the Hedgehog 3 and Knuckles. Together, they are considered to be the complete game. Plus, players can play as Knuckles and Super Knuckles in the continuation. Sonic 3 was positively received. Sega Magazine declared it to be far superior than Sonic 2 as a whole, and a serious contender for the Best Platform Game Ever award. While it may not have won that particular award, it was given Editor's Choice Platinum by Electronic Gaming Monthly. Fun fact, according to the game's tester Jay Pataki, the message, "Get Blue Spheres," that appears at the start of the game's special stages originally said, "Get Blue Balls." The text was changed because, well, I'm sure you can guess why. Speaking of blue balls, that's all for part 2. Click the video on the screen to watch part 3. Thanks for watching. Wow, 2 parts down. We're still talking about the early years of Sonic. Either he needs to slow down or we need to speed up even more. So let's get on with it. This is the evolution of Sonic, Part 3. Now, where were we? Oh yeah, 1994, the same year that McDonald's started distributing Sonic toys along with its Happy Meals. The first set was tied to the release of the third main Sonic game, Sonic the Hedgehog 3. Surprisingly, it would not be until 2003 that McDonald's would launch their second series of Sonic toys, this time in the form of handheld games. A similar set of handheld games was released the following year to promote the game Sonic Heroes. The actual games were not very noteworthy, but there was a hilariously bad advert from Pakistan at the time that has since made the rounds on the internet thanks to its awfulness. A variety of toys and games relating to Sonic have been included in Happy Meals around the world. Most recently, there was a set of plastic models to promote the Sonic the Hedgehog 2 movie. The adverts for these were a lot more pleasing to the eye, like this one of Sonic collecting his drive-thru order from Tails. However, some fans were pretty upset when the inclusion of Super Sonic among the toy characters spoiled the fact that he would likely make an appearance in the movie. Sorry if I spoiled that for you too, but hey, McDonald's did it first.
Oh, it's like that?
The next mainstream game to feature Sonic was Sonic Drift, which at first was a Japanese exclusive playable on the Sega Game Gear. Released in March 1994, it only became available to gamers outside of Japan when it was included in compilations years later. However, the sequel, Sonic Drift 2, came out internationally in 1995. It was renamed Sonic Drift Racing in Europe. Similar to other early 90s racing games such as F-Zero or Rock and Roll Racing, in terms of gameplay, Sonic Drift was a competitive kart racer, with characters from the much-loved franchise competing on tracks based on the series and familiar power-ups like rings and springs. The first Drift is notable for being the first Sonic game in which players could actually play as Amy Rose or Dr. Robotnik. Other choices were, of course, Sonic or Tails. Meanwhile, Sonic Drift 2's lineup was expanded to include Knuckles the Echidna, Fang the Sniper, and Metal Sonic, making it the first game in which Fang the Sniper or Metal Sonic could be controlled. Both games underwhelmed critics, receiving scores around 50% or lower. Regarding the first, Mark Hill of Sega Pro noted a sense of anticlimax that hits you almost immediately and declared that the pretty graphics and modest sounds don't compensate. As for the second, GameSpot called the game unplayable because of poor handling and a really short horizon. Despite the reviews, Sonic Drift was a commercial success, and it would not be the last time that Sonic and his pals were featured in a racing spin-off. Speaking of spin-offs, Knuckles and Tails both received their own games in 1995 in the form of Knuckles Chaotix and Tails Sky Patrol. The former introduced Team Chaotix, which included new characters such as Vector the Crocodile, Espio the Chameleon, and Charmy Bee. It played similar to the original Sonic games and their bonus stages. Chaotix garnered mixed to somewhat positive reviews and became the best-selling Sonic title released on the Sega 32X. Tails Sky Patrol is a side-scrolling shooter that debuted some strange, non-playable characters like Witch Card and Carriata. The handheld game, which was released for Sega's Game Gear, was criticized for having poor controls and harsh difficulty, but its unique gameplay was at least deemed interesting by Sega Saturn magazine. Tails received another title of his own for the Game Gear soon after with the release of Tails Adventures in 1995. Developed by Aspect, it takes place on Coco Island in a time before Tails had met Sonic. The Fox Cub must use his various gadgets to save the island from an evil empire seeking to use the Chaos Emeralds for world domination. A familiar story. Sonic took center stage in his own spin-off for the Game Gear, also in 1995, called Sonic Labyrinth. It was an isometric puzzle game developed by Minato Gaiken, likened to the arcade video game Marble Madness. Though received warmly at the time, retrospective reviews tend to label Labyrinth as lacking in speed with clunky controls. 1996 took our spiky friend in a new direction as he starred in Sonic the Hedgehog, the movie.
I did it.
Technically a two-part animation, the first 30-minute episode titled Welcome to Eggman Land was released in Japan in January of 1996. In March, the second episode, Sonic vs. Metal Sonic, was released. It was not until 1999 that an English dubbed version was released in America on DVD and VHS. The movie follows Sonic and Tails as they attempt to defeat Metal Robotnik and then Metal Sonic in the Land of Darkness and in Robotropolis, respectively. Characters new to the franchise make an appearance, such as Old Man Owl, President, and the perpetually annoying Sarah, at least according to Henry Gilbert of Games Radar. The critic also disliked the movie's scenes of slapstick humor, anime cliches, and childish voice acting. He did praise the idea of a colorful, fast-paced anime adaptation of Sonic, though, and found the fight scenes between Sonic and Metal enjoyable. Fun fact, translating anime from Japanese to English can be tricky, as has been proven with Sonic over the years. For example, Sonic may appear to be more of a badass in Japanese versions, because he sometimes uses swear words. Obviously, this gets toned down or changed in English-speaking versions, but it highlights a significant cultural difference as swear words, especially when spoken in English, are not as controversial in Japan. There may also be mistakes in the translation, as happened with the movie when Knuckles was originally determined to be a mole, not an echidna. English-speaking versions also called the character an accomplished flyer, even though he can only glide. To be fair to the translators, though, there is a scene in the movie where it appears like Knuckles is flying.
My skills are superior.
In the same year his movie came out, Sonic got his own fighting game, aptly called Sonic the Fighters. It was initially seen only in Japanese arcades. However, limited releases later took place for the European and American arcade markets, where it was renamed Sonic Championship. Gamers could choose between 8 fighters, including many names familiar to Sonic fans, as well as some new ones, like Bark the Polar Bear and Bean the Dynamite, the latter being an anthropomorphic woodpecker. Super Sonic became available too, if in story mode the player reached the second round against Metal Sonic without losing any previous rounds. Other fighters could also be played by hacking the arcade console, including Dr. Eggman, Metal Sonic, and Honey the Cat, a character that was ultimately scrapped before release. In November 2012, a digital high-definition port of the game came out for the Xbox 360 and PlayStation 3, keeping the original Sonic the Fighters title. Honey the Cat was also included as a fully playable character. Fun fact, you can catch a glimpse of a Sonic Championship arcade machine at the beginning of the Disney film Wreck-It Ralph. The movie was released in 2012, the same year as Sonic the Fighters received its HD remake. Both Sonic and Dr. Eggman made cameos in Wreck-It Ralph. In November 1996, an animated cartoon special aired in North America called Sonic Christmas Blast. That same month, a new game titled Sonic 3D Blast came out for the Sega Mega Drive and Sega Saturn. Known in Japan and in Europe as Sonic 3D Flicky's Island, it would also be released on PC a year later. The game, set on Flicky Island, was developed in the UK by Traveler's Tales and published by Sega. According to legend, Chaos Emeralds lie dormant on Flicky Island, and in order to find them, Sonic and his pals must first look for birds named Flickies. A platformer in isometric view, players take control of Sonic and run, jump, and spin dash across 7 main zones, each zone divided into 2 acts as well as a third act containing a boss fight. In order to beat a level in the fastest possible time, players must find all the Flickies. There are 5 per stage, and a Flicky's behavior varies according to its color. Players must touch the Flicky to make it follow them to the Dimension Ring, where they can then continue the act. Interestingly, there are different bonus levels depending on which platform you play in the game. On the Sega Mega Drive, Sonic runs down a bridge, collecting rings and avoiding bombs. On the Sega Saturn, Sonic runs down a 3-dimensional half-pipe covered in rings and bombs, and on PC, the half-pipe is similar to the one seen in Sonic the Hedgehog 2. Sonic 3D Blast received an average score of around 60% from critics, who generally liked the soundtrack, graphics, and boss fights, but weren't a fan of the game's slow pace. Jeff Gerstmann of GameSpot complained that wandering around the levels looking for the last enemy gets boring very quickly. He concluded, had this game been more action-oriented with more enemies and much faster gameplay, it would have truly lived up to the Sonic name. Commercially, 3D Blast did well. In total, more than 700,000 units were sold. The Sega Saturn version was the system's second best-selling game worldwide, behind another title developed by Team Sonic called Nights into Dreams. A partnership with Jack in the Box fast food restaurants meant that kids in America could get their hands on the PC version of Sonic 3D Blast as a bonus. A mediocre showing from Sonic was not what Sega needed at this time, though, as a new rival had just crashed into the video game arena in 1996. It was, of course, Crash Bandicoot, whose debut on the PlayStation was a roaring success for Sony. At the same time, Mario was doing his thing, and Sonic was in danger of getting left behind. In trying to keep up, Sonic tried his hands, gloves, at a racing game on console next. Released in November 1997 for the Sega Saturn and ported to PC in December 1998, Sonic R is best described as a 3D platformer third-person racing game. Players took control of one of 10 possible characters, with the aim to finish among the top 3 on each level. There was also an element of exploration involved, since each course contained numerous secrets that could be found by taking different routes and shortcuts. Power-up items such as rings, Sonic tokens, and Chaos Emeralds unlocked additional features within the game. There were 5 courses in total, one of which needed to be unlocked, all of which began with the letter R. There was Resort Island, Radical City,
I did it.
Regal Ruin, Reactive Factory, and Radiant Emerald. Though the game received fairly positive reviews and a game ranking of 70%, most reviewers thought that the game was a bit too short. Game Revolution hated the in-game music too, saying that cheesy lyrics like "Can you feel the sunshine brighten up your day" felt like Disney suddenly taking over the world, and Gestapo mice are forcing you to smile all the time. Overall, it wasn't a bad way for Sonic to end his run on the Sega Saturn system. Plus, this game was considered the last of these classic era Sonic games, as the characters would get a redesign in the next title.
Thank you!
That next title happened to be Sonic Adventure. Released towards the end of 1999 internationally, this Sonic's debut to full 3D on Sega's new Dreamcast console. After learning of the legends surrounding Chaos, a mysterious liquefied life form trapped in the Master Emerald, Dr. Eggman shatters the Emerald, freeing Chaos in hopes of later controlling it. Eggman's ultimate aim? To collect all of the Chaos Emeralds and use Chaos's full power to conquer the city and turn it into Robotnik Land. Geez, this guy never gives up, does he? The player controls a number of familiar faces, including Sonic, Tails, Knuckles, and Amy, while also controlling 2 new characters, E-102 Gamma, a gunner robot created by Dr. Robotnik, and Big the Cat, a laid-back and easygoing fellow who loves to fish and is never without his favorite rod and lure. Each playable character has their own style. You get to see the story from different points of view. Players can also get to play as Super Sonic in the ultimate battle against Perfect Chaos. In a significant departure from previous Sonic games, this one is divided into 2 types of levels: action stages and adventure fields. Players can access the action stages by finding entrance points in the adventure fields of the game. In addition to the entrance points, they may also explore and come across simple puzzles or level-up items. As the player progresses through their story, more areas of the adventure fields open up. The new blend of styles and variety is highly praised by game's graphics, soundtrack, and fast, enjoyable gameplay. Game rating was reported an average of 86.5 out of 100. The only drawbacks were a poor camera system, frame rate issues, and big ads and fishing stages. Sonic Adventure ended up selling close to 2.5 million units worldwide, making it the best-selling game on the Dreamcast. Fun fact about those character makeovers I mentioned earlier, artist Yuji Nakawa had to overcome many new technical problems when redesigning Sonic and the others for their new adventure. For instance, now that the camera was behind Sonic as opposed to side-on, Nakawa needed to change Sonic's proportions so that his body didn't look weird. Sonic's quills were doubled in size and made sharper. His nose, arms, and legs were stretched and he was given more angles. In other words, the chubby hedgehog was put on a diet. Sonic's fur also became a darker shade of blue, and his eyes were turned green in contrast with his skin. For inspiration, Nakawa turned to Dragon Ball Z and its character artist, Akira Toriyama. As a result, the new Sonic looked more graffiti or street-like. Let's continue Sonic's adventure in the next episode. Click the video on screen to keep watching, and please leave a like. Thank you. Why is Sonic the Hedgehog obsessed with chili dogs? Good question. As it turns out, his Uncle Chuck is a restaurant sold his comic books and animated TV series. Sonic used to work there as a delivery boy. He revealed his own secret recipe called called Chili Dog a la Sonic in 1993. The first time our hero Hedgehog was shown eating a chili dog in-game was not until 2008's Sonic Unleashed. However, just for the record, you should never feed chili dogs to a normal hedgehog. Sonic, special. And now that we've cleared that up, welcome back. This is the evolution of Sonic the Hedgehog, Part 4. In 1999, an animated TV series called Sonic Underground began showing on TVs in America and France. It followed the adventures of Sonic and his siblings, Sonic, a pink-hued hedgehog, and Manic, who's green. Uncle Chuck from the Archie comics series and the original Sonic TV show was also included. This time around, however, he doesn't appear to be Sonic's biological uncle. Instead, he's known to Sonic as Uncle through his adopted parents. Aside from the titular protagonist, Knuckles and Dr. Robotnik are the only other established characters from the Sonic universe to make regular appearances. Underground was very different from previous Sonic anime, comics, and games. It's usually considered to be its own standalone project, despite many of the same people working on the show as have worked on earlier franchise entries. Jaleel White, an American actor who you might know as Steve Urkel in Family Matters.
All you have to do is hitch up your bed, bend your knees, and stick out your pelvis. I'm telling you, baby, it's better than that.
Once again provided the voice for Sonic. In fact, for all three of the Hedgehog siblings, though not when they are singing. Underground was the last Sonic TV show to feature White as Sonic's voice.
Wonder what Butnick's thinking right now.
The Underground series is probably most notable for its songs, though, composed by Mike Piccirillo, which appeared as featured music videos in all 40 episodes. Despite gaining a cult following over the years, Sonic Underground was a flop and was heavily criticized by fans and reviewers. David Cornelius of DVD Talk was left disappointed, saying, "For all the cleverness that went into crafting an all-new backstory, the episodes themselves are uninspired." Games Radar went as far as to call the show one of the absolute worst Sonic moments. As for my personal advice, if you haven't seen it, then I would advise watching the intro with its cool opening theme song and then going a little further. Some Sonic fans choose not to even talk about Underground and prefer to leave it buried. So, moving quickly on. The year 2000 saw Sonic again trying something new. Well, new for him, but not new for gaming or for Mario. Sonic Shuffle, co-developed by Sonic Team and Hudson Soft for the Dreamcast, was a party video game that was largely viewed as an inferior ripoff of Mario Party, which in 2000 was already on its third installment. Involving a 3D board game and mini-events, up to 4 players compete in the dream world called Imaginary World, where they must retrieve precious stones to help a fairy save the world from Void, the game's main villain. Players can play as either Sonic, Tails, Knuckles, or Amy Rose initially, with other characters from Sonic Adventure available to unlock. Each character has unique abilities to aid them in moving around the game board. The main difference from Mario Party is that Sonic Shuffle uses cards to determine player moves as opposed to dice, hence the shuffle. Sonic's party game was not received well. It holds a 54 out of 100 on Metacritic. GameSpot, who gave it 4.5 out of 10, wrote, "The combination of the unbearable load times, the smattering of minigames, and the poor minigame design makes Sonic Shuffle a boring diversion at best." 2001 brought about the 10th anniversary of Sonic and a follow-up to Sonic Adventure. Sonic Adventure 2 was released in June for the Dreamcast. Similar to its predecessor in terms of its varied gameplay and style, the sequel introduced 2 new characters, Shadow the Hedgehog and Rouge the Bat, both of whom would go on to become regulars in the Sonic universe. Spoilers, Shadow the Hedgehog was even featured in the second Sonic the Hedgehog movie that came out in 2022.
Project Shadow.
Sonic also received a new pair of sneakers, a change that would remain in subsequent comics and TV shows. Continuing to take place using different characters' viewpoints, Adventure 2 went a step further by splitting the experience into a hero story and a dark storyline. Players could advance either one at any time, but could only finish the main story once both modes had been completed. While playing the hero story, players control either Sonic, Tails, or Knuckles. On the dark side, they control Shadow, Rouge, or Dr. Eggman. Different characters have different skills that are suited to different types of stages. There are high-speed action stages, where Sonic and Shadow face off in levels with abilities similar to those of Sonic in the first adventure game. Lock-on shooting stages allow Tails and Dr. Eggman to battle it out with gameplay styles reminiscent of E102 Gamma in the earlier title. And hunting stages are a bout between Knuckles and Rouge, with Knuckles retaining his gameplay style from before and Rouge having similar traits. For its variety and replay value, Sonic Adventure 2 received critical acclaim, registering a score of 89 on Metacritic. Anthony Chow of IGN called it one of the best Sonic games ever, and concluded that this is the last Sonic game in these declining Dreamcast years. It's satisfying to know that the DC didn't go out with a bang, but with a sonic boom. Chow couldn't have said it better, as unfortunately the Dreamcast as a console became defunct shortly after Adventure 2's release. From here on out, Sega would start to ship Sonic out to be played solely on other companies' systems. Adventure 2 was re-released for the Nintendo GameCube less than a year later, under the name Sonic Adventure 2 Battle. Whereas only 100,000 copies were sold on Dreamcast, the GameCube version achieved sales of over 2.5 million. Fun fact, Sonic Adventure 2 became well known for its zany commercials, one of which showed old-style experiments of a good and bad hedgehog, asking, "Which hedgehog are you?" One infamous scene in particular parodied Jurassic Park. Showing a cow being lowered into the bad hedgehog's pen, followed by horrific noises, blood spattering a window, and the hedgehog burping. At the same time Sonic was transitioning to Nintendo's GameCube console, he was also appearing on the Game Boy Advance handheld. Sonic Advance was a side-scrolling platformer similar in style and gameplay to earlier 2D Sonic titles. In Advance, though, players can choose to play as one of 4 characters, and each has their own gimmicks or different layouts between zones. As before, the aim is to get to the end of each act as quickly as possible. Each character, aside from Amy Rose, can utilize the spin jump, spin attack, and spin dash from earlier titles. Melee-based moves are added, inspired by those seen in the adventure titles, and Amy's moveset is centered around her use of the Pico Pico hammer. Advance received solid scores from critics, racking up a Metacritic average of 87. Ricardo Torres of GameSpot wasn't a fan of the special stages control schemes, but liked the graphics, music, and multiplayer modes. He said, while it lacks some polish, Sonic Advance is still a strong entry in the Game Boy Advance library. A follow-up named Sonic Advance 2 was released for the Game Boy Advance a year later in December 2002, introducing a new character, Cream the Rabbit. The sequel received slightly worse reviews than its predecessor. Nonetheless, the game was generally praised by critics. OneUp.com highlighted the game's visuals, stages, and music as plus points, declaring Advance 2 to be probably one of the most challenging Sonic games ever due to both the Chaos Emerald's requirements and the now active boss battles. The review went on to call it an outstanding addition to the Sonic library and definitely up there as one of my favorites alongside Sonic 3 and Knuckles and Sonic CD. The game registered an average score of 83. Sonic Advance 1 and 2 were both major commercial successes, each selling over 1 million copies. In 2003, an anime series titled Sonic X was produced in Japan by TMS Entertainment in collaboration with Sega and Team Sonic. Inspired by the Sonic Adventure games, its 78 episodes are split into 8 sagas and feature well-known characters. such as Tails, Knuckles, Amy Rose, Shadow, Dr. Eggman, and many more, as well as the titular blue-colored protagonist. Having been on the air for over 15 years, it is the longest-running Sonic TV series. It has been highly praised for its faithfulness to the games, and critical reviews are mostly positive, aside from the English voice acting being panned as a horrible localization. Conrad Zimmerman of Destructoid said, "It's really annoying how all the recent Sonic games use these untalented actors and actresses in their dubs, because they make the original English voices sound like award-winning performers. Sonic X's aesthetics have been deemed nice to look at, and when comparing the music to the previously mentioned Sonic Underground show, Games Radar commented that at least the song fits. Can't imagine Sonic listening to underground wailing Meatloaf light rock, but he definitely jammed to Sonic X." The anime consistently reached #1 in the ratings when shown in the United States and in France. Some of Sonic X was added to Netflix in 2019, and episodes can also be watched on Hulu, YouTube, and Amazon Prime Video. Fun fact, a concept art trailer for Sonic X included a single picture of a blue-gray hedgehog that didn't end up appearing in the show. The image was also found on Sega's website under the name Nazo.jpg. Nazo in Japanese means mystery. No more official information about the character was ever released, so Sonic fans decided to create their own fan-made films, including Sonic Nazo Unleashed DX, which has a whopping 65 million views on YouTube. Sonic game designer Takashi Iizuka has since revealed on Facebook that Nazo was a scrapped version of Super Sonic. Game Boy Advance owners could play 2 more Sonic titles as of 2003. The first was Sonic Pinball Party, a spin-off game developed by Jupiter and Sonic Team, in which players could enjoy various pinball-themed games, along with several multiplayer modes and mini-games. It referenced other Sonic Team games, most notably Nights into Dreams and Samba de Amigo. Aside from the main story mode, players could play Hot Potato, Hockey, Ladder Climb, and casino-themed games like Roulette, Slots, and Bingo. The other Game Boy Advance title was Sonic Battle. Controversially, it was initially only sold at Target stores in North America, making it a United States-only game because, at the time, Canada and Mexico did not have Target stores. It was the first Sonic fighting game on a handheld device. Battle featured 2D sprites duking it out in 3D environments. It was believed to be much easier than traditional fighters since there were no complicated combo moves to learn. Instead, secret combo cards could be obtained by entering a code at the Sonic Team building in the central city area of the game during Emerald's story. Emerald was a main character and a humanoid, mustard yellow robot, capable of strengthening himself by acquiring his opponent's moves. In addition to its story, battle, and training modes, the game also featured mini-games, most of which needed to be unlocked by progressing through the main campaign. Remember the Nokia N-Gage? Well, in 2003, N-Gage owners also received a handheld Sonic game called Sonic N. It was basically a port of Sonic Advance made playable on a gaming phone. Pinball Party, Battle, and Sonic N all received decent reviews, scoring close to a 6 or 7 with most critics. The next major Sonic release came in 2004 with Sonic Heroes, developed by Sonic and published by Sega for PC, GameCube, PlayStation 2, and Xbox. A 3D platformer with gameplay elements akin to those of Sonic Adventure 1 and 2. The biggest change was that players now controlled a party of characters, with the ability to change its party leader at any time. The gamer controlled the leader, and the other group members followed behind. The game's story was split into 4 main storylines, each involving a party mode of different characters, plus a hidden 5th and final story. During the Team Sonic story, players could control Sonic, Tails, or Knuckles. The Dark story featured Shadow the Hedgehog, Rouge the Bat, and a new character, a robot called 123 Omega. Team Rose was made up of Amy Rose, the cat, Cream the rabbit, and Cheese. Team Chaotix's party consisted of Charmy Bee, SPO the chameleon, and Vector the crocodile. With all of those playable characters, it's not surprising that Sonic Heroes was featured in the 2008 Guinness World Records Gamers Edition for having the most playable characters in a platform game. Each character had individual abilities. Each stage had a slightly different layout for each team, providing unique challenges and objectives for each story. There were also special stages in Sonic Heroes, which were optional levels set inside circular tubes. To enter them, the player needed to find a special stage key and finish the mission without losing it. There were 14 special stages in total, 7 of which were Emerald Challenges, in which players could obtain Chaos Emeralds. Heroes received mixed to positive reviews, scoring 73 on Metacritic. Among its positive aspects, critics noted the game's closeness to its 2D roots, colorful graphics, and vibrant, cheery environments. Negative criticisms included an uncooperative and terrible camera system and some horrendous voice acting. Sonic Heroes was a commercial success, making it onto the best-selling lists for PS2, GameCube, and Xbox, while selling over 2.1 million copies in total.
Sonic Advance 3!
A hotly anticipated third entry into the Sonic Advance lineup hit shelves in June 2004 for the Game Boy Advance. Using gameplay elements from the previous titles, Sonic Advance 3 contained 7 zones, each of them having separate hub worlds called Zone Maps that included 3 acts, a boss fight, and 2 minigames in which you could gain extra lives. The newer Advance was different in that it allowed the player to play with a partner, one who augmented the player's actions. This sidekick could either be controlled by a second player or by AI. Additionally, players could use a special ability known as a tag action. Each partner affected the lead character's moveset and passive abilities. Plus, depending on the partnership, each team would adopt a certain strength, either flight, power, or speed. Some duos were given team names alluding to their relationship. For example, Sonic and Tails together are called Unbreakable Bond. Sonic and Knuckles are fighting buddies. Sonic and Amy are lovely couple, and Amy and Cream are Team Jubilee. Copies of Sonic Advance 3 raced off store shelves, selling over 100,000 copies in the UK alone, while total sales were still only a fraction of the first 2 games. It did go on to win Handheld Game of the Year at the 2004 Golden Joystick Awards and garnered scores of 79 on Metacritic. Not all critics celebrated the new gameplay dynamics, but Nick Maragos from OneUp.com declared that the Sonic team finally came up with a way of introducing teamwork and variance between characters that doesn't overwhelm Sonic's bread-and-butter gameplay. In the next episode, we'll continue Sonic's journey and discuss some surprising partnerships we've still yet to cover. Click the video on screen to keep watching. As Sonic entered into his awkward teenage years at the start of the 2000s, he struggled to make the leap to the latest generation of consoles. Following some hit-and-miss games, plus some bizarre public appearances, perceptions of Sonic were beginning to lose momentum. Still trying to hold on to his former glory, our favorite hedgehog needed to switch things up. Prepare yourself for one of the cringiest Sonic games ever, and a very surprising collaboration. This is the evolution of Sonic the Hedgehog, Part 5. In 2004, Sonic appeared alongside characters from Super Monkey Ball, Virtua Fighter, and other well-known franchises in Sega Superstars. Developed by Sonic Team exclusively for the PlayStation 2 and its iToy attachment. It featured a series of games based on previous Sega titles. Fittingly for Sonic, this was his first appearance in a game rated higher than E for Everyone by the ESRB. It was rated T for Teens. Each superstar had their own game within the game, and for Sonic, it involved the player using the iPlay camera to guide the hedgehog through a tunnel. The aim was to collect rings and Chaos Emeralds and obtain the highest score at the end of the game. The stages were a combination of the full-pipe special stages from Sonic Heroes and the half-pipe special stages that were first seen in Sonic the Hedgehog 2. In Superstars, completing all 3 difficulties as Sonic unlocked Shadow's story, which allowed the player to control Shadow the Hedgehog instead. The game's difficulty was ramped up significantly when playing as Shadow. A sequel to Sega Superstars, Sega Superstars Tennis was developed by Sumo Digital in March 2008 for multiple platforms, including the Xbox 360, PS2 and PS3, the Wii, and Nintendo DS. Fun fact, an entertainment shopping center called the Sony Metreon created a Walk of Game in 2005 in San Francisco, California. Based on Hollywood's Walk of Fame, it honored video game characters and gave them a customized floor tile. Sonic was one of the first 3 heroes to be honored in the Walk of Game, alongside Mario and Link. Sadly, in 2012, the area was converted to a Target store, and the walkway was removed. 2005 was a big year for Shadow the Hedgehog as he received his own game playable on Xbox, PlayStation 2, and Nintendo GameCube. With the tagline, Hero or Villain, gamers were invited to uncover the truth about Sonic's arch-rival, Shadow the Hedgehog. In the game, which plays similar to past 3D Sonic titles like Sonic Heroes, Shadow goes on a quest to recover his memory, something he's been trying to do since Sonic Heroes, all while an evil alien race known as the Black Arms is invading Earth. Sonic appears as a playable character in the shooter action platformer, but only in co-op mode. To be honest, that probably came as a relief to Sonic as the game was a flop. It received a score of only 51 on Metacritic and was criticized for its poor controls, mature themes that involved swearing, and for introducing guns into Sonic-style gameplay. Matt Helgeson of Game Informer said, not only is this new adult interpretation of Sonic painfully dumb, it's also ill-advised and almost feels like a betrayal to longtime fans. Ouch! Thankfully, on the exact same day that Shadow the Hedgehog was released, a Sonic game called Sonic Rush came for the Nintendo DS. Described as a 2.5D side-scroller, it made use of the dual-screen aspect of the DS in clever and exciting ways. For instance, the screens were used together as an extended vertical screen for very steep climbs and drops. The unique handheld design also allowed players to experience Sonic in both 2D and 3D in the same game by combining two-dimensional environments with three-dimensional models. Appropriately, the game centered around 2 parallel universes colliding, one featuring Sonic the Hedgehog and the other featuring a new character called Blaze the Cat. In addition to battling Dr. Eggman, they also fight a new villain named Eggman Nega. The player controls either Sonic or Blaze once the latter becomes available and can make use of a new game mechanic, the Tension Gauge. This allows the player to utilize Super Boost or Fire Boost for Sonic or Blaze, respectively. Once engaged, the protagonists can plow through enemies and obstacles without taking damage. Whereas Sonic can transform into Super Sonic, Blaze's equivalent is called Burning Blaze. The game itself was a hot seller as around 1.3 million copies of Sonic Rush were sold. Reviews were very positive and praised the game for having the feel of older Sonic titles, such as those on Sega Mega Drive. Sonic Rush registered an impressive score of 82 on Metacritic. A follow-up game titled Sonic Rush Adventure hit store shelves in September 2007. Advertised as a high-speed, high-seas adventure that took place in Blaze the Cat's dimension. Maureen the Raccoon was a new, non-playable character who made her debut in the sequel. The game improved upon the first Sonic Rush in terms of smoother gameplay, although many reviewers thought that the story was weaker than its predecessor. Sonic Rush Adventure received a score of 78 on Metacritic.
I did it.
To celebrate the 15th anniversary of Sonic the Hedgehog, a racing game with hoverboards was released on Xbox, PlayStation 2, and the Nintendo GameCube in 2006. Called Sonic Riders, it pitted players against 7 competitors in races across 16 tracks, the majority of which needed to be unlocked through progress in the story mode. Speaking of which, there were 2 main storylines in the game. that of the Heroes, featuring the familiar furry faces of Sonic, Tails, and Knuckles, and also the Babylon storyline, whose teams consisted of new characters, namely Jet the Hawk, Wave the Swallow, and Storm the Albatross. Additional characters could be unlocked, and while all of them played the same way, each possessed different stats, and their character type determined their strength in 3 categories: speed, flight, and power. Extreme gear was used for vehicles in-game, which were all hovering vehicles in the forms of hoverboards, motorbikes, or rocket skates. Each extreme gear varied in terms of its performance and stats, with the potential to give users an advantage. Powered by a limited amount of air, the player could perform jumps, steer, and brake. However, as the air tank emptied, these driving abilities became much trickier. Once the extreme gear had completely run out of air, the playable character would be left running the race on foot, at least until collecting more air via an air pick or picking up an air item box. Unfortunately, Sonic Riders wasn't exactly a big hit. Metacritic registered a low review score of just 59. Many criticized the confusing gameplay, and while IGN stated that at least this is a much better game than Shadow the Hedgehog, Frank Dry of Hyper disliked the fact that the Blue Wonder is forced to hop on a NAF hoverboard to race. Apparently, most fans agreed. Fun fact: now one of the most recognizable mascots in all of gaming, Sonic is not only featured in numerous different titles, but he is also featured in these same titles that have been released and re-released over and over again. The original Sonic the Hedgehog game has seen close to 20 official re-releases, having been remastered for several consoles and included in many Sonic collections. In the early 2000s, the Sonic Mega Collection and Mega Collection Plus both came out, as well as the Sonic Gems Collection, though the latter did not include the original Sonic the Hedgehog game. Riders wasn't the only racing-based present that Sonic received for his 15th birthday. Whereas that game was made by Sonic Team, a different game called Sonic Rivals was made the same year by Backbone Entertainment for the PlayStation Portable. Best described as a 2.5D side-scrolling racing platforming video game, the gameplay in Rivals was closer to that of the earlier 2D Sonic titles. Taking control of either Sonic, Knuckles, Shadow, or Silver, each character had their own story in Rivals, though the actual gameplay was pretty much the same for all. Metal Sonic could also be unlocked as a secret, playable character. All of the zones in Sonic Rivals featured a character racing against a rival, hence the game's title. To win, the player needed to reach their goal before their opponent. In boss stages, though, the player was required to defeat the boss before their rival. A collectible card system was one of the main features in Rivals, with 150 cards detailing cameos from major and minor characters, box arts, and items from past Sonic games. Performing certain objectives in-game, such as collecting a number of rings, hitting a rival X number of times, or getting to the goal in a prescribed time, resulted in the player being awarded a card. Those cards could then be used to unlock other features, including character outfits. On average, the game received a score of 64 from reviewers. IGN awarded it a 7.4 out of 10, highlighting the game's replay value, graphics, and entertaining stages. GameSpot found the level designs frustrating and tedious, but enjoyed the colorful graphics and a good sense of speed. Sonic Rivals 2 was released for the PSP 3 years later, with Tails, Rouge the Bat, and Espio the Chameleon joining the action. Aside from adding more characters, though, it failed to impress and ended up receiving an even worse score than its predecessor, with an average score of 60. Speaking of failing to impress, that's an understatement for this next game. Yeah, if you're a Sonic fan, then you've probably been waiting for this one, the infamous Sonic the Hedgehog from 2006, otherwise known as Sonic 2006. Ironically, this game was intended to be a rebirth of the series, though it was lucky not to be the cause of death. Apparently, the intention was to answer the question, what if Sonic the Hedgehog existed in the real world? It was to use elements from the Sonic Adventure games that people enjoyed and bring Sonic back to his roots, hence the title. Set in the city of Soliana, Princess Elise III is the keeper of a dark secret known as the Flames of Disaster, which involves the Chaos Emeralds. As you'd expect, Dr. Eggman wants to kidnap Princess Elise to obtain the secrets of the Flames of Disaster. But a blue blur soon intervenes, which of course turns out to be Sonic. As with previous games, the story is split into 3 episodes. There's a Sonic episode, a Shadow episode, and an episode for Silver the Hedgehog. There's also a last episode. This game was the last of the story in an episodic format like this. Similar to Sonic Adventure, the game consists of action stages and town stages. In the town stages, the player can free roam within Sariana, talk to NPCs, and buy level-up items. The plot is also furthered by finding the entrances to action stages using the mirrors of Sariana. A ranking system like the one used in Sonic Rush provides the player with a grade between D and S. In addition to story mode, there are 2 multiplayer modes. Tag mode is a co-op between Sonic, Silver, and Shadow. It features between the 2 modes and downgraded graphics, making objects extremely shaded. First mode, Tag mode, is a co-op of play where 2 players must work together to clear levels and collect Chaos Emeralds. Lives are shared, meaning if one player loses a life when only 1 life remains, both will receive a game over. The second game style is Battle Mode, which is essentially a race to the goal. Minigames were rumored prior to release, as well as 4-player gameplay, but these were scrapped, likely due to the rushed development. Sonic 06 is notable for being the worst game of the franchise to date.
I did it.
While its soundtrack was decent, the game was widely criticized for its numerous gameplay glitches, inconsistent plot, very long loading times, and the characters of Princess Elise and Silver. Playable on Xbox 360 or PlayStation 3, this dumpster fire has landed on many worst video games of all time lists. It holds a score of 43 on Metacritic, categorizing it as generally unfavorable. One review summed it up as being the rock bottom of the franchise. Man, Sonic's 15th anniversary was a rough one. To the relief of Sega, Sonic 2006 still sold well though, with sales described as strong and solid. Some sources calculate the game's total sales to be over 2 million copies. Fun fact, in the heyday of his youth, Sonic was credited with bringing fast-paced gaming into the 90s. He engaged Mario, the grandfather of side-scrollers, in a bitter rivalry epitomized by the console wars. At one point in time, schoolyards were divided between Sonic and Mario fans. And to this day, the debate still rages over who is the better hero. As recently as 2021, GamesRant released an article titled Mario vs. Sonic the Hedgehog, Who Wins in a Fight? Sonic came out as the winner, by the way, but only just, thanks to his raw speed, physical force, and transformation into the invincible Super Sonic. The intense rivalry between Sonic and Mario is why the next entry in Sonic's evolution was truly a surprise to gamers. In fact, most people thought it was an early April Fool's joke when the game was announced on March 28, 2007 by both Sega and Nintendo.
That's right.
Mario and Sonic at the Olympic Games. Yes, Sega partnered with Nintendo after years of competition, and the latter published the game in Japan while Sega oversaw distribution in North America and Europe for the Wii and Nintendo DS. Now that Sega wasn't producing its own consoles anymore, the console war was officially over, and this title was seen by many as a truce between the mascots. Officially licensed by the International Olympic Committee, it was the first official video game of the 2008 Summer Olympic Games to be released. It gave gamers the chance to assume the roles of either Sonic or Mario and compete in up to 20 various Olympic events. 14 additional characters from both franchises could compete in environments based on the official venues at the Beijing Olympics, which were stylized to fit the aesthetics of former Mario and Sonic titles. Each member of Team Sonic was given a matchup against someone from Team Mario. These face-offs included Sonic vs. Mario,
I did it.
Shadow vs. Luigi, Knuckles vs. Wario, Amy vs. Peach, Tails vs. Yoshi, and Dr. Eggman vs. Waluigi, among others. Other characters like Cream the Rabbit, Toad, Espio the Chameleon, and Shy Guy could be seen as referees. The events were organized into tournament and circuit modes and included 8 classifications: athletics, gymnastics, shooting, rowing, archery, aquatics, fencing, and table tennis. Dream Stream events were unlockable versions of 4 of the Olympic events in the Wii version of the game and 5 events on the Nintendo DS. They differed from the original events by including attributes from the Mario and Sonic video game universes. A gallery with facts and trivia about the real-life Olympics was also included. 5 categories of trivia matched with mini-games, where completion of the mini-game unlocked the trivia answer. Classic music from both the Sonic and Mario series then became available in the gallery once all levels in a category were cleared. A collaboration with Mario gave Sonic the boost he sorely needed, and the Wii version of their game was awarded Best Game of 2007 on the platform at the Games Convention in Leipzig. GameSpot only gave the game a 6 out of 10, praising the wide variety of events, but adding that many of them were too similar. The reviewer also said that the motion controls were uninteresting and occasionally frustrating. On the other hand, Nintendo Life praised the controls as an alternative to button bashing and awarded a 7 out of 10. IGN gave a 7.9 out of 10 and favored the fantasy events as well as archery, which it said ended up stealing the show. Fun fact, in the aquatic event, Sonic wears an orange life jacket since he cannot actually swim. Although if you watched part 1, you'd remember that most hedgehogs actually can swim. Also, Peach and Daisy were originally meant to have swimsuits, but Nintendo rejected the designs. The swimsuits did appear in later games, though. Mario and Sonic's collaboration for Olympic events continued with Mario and Sonic at the Olympic Winter Games in 2009, and they covered the Winter Olympics again in Mario and Sonic at the Sochi 2014 Olympic Winter Games. There's also been a Mario and Sonic game for every Summer Olympics since the pair's inaugural meeting. There's Mario and Sonic at the London 2012 Olympic Games, Mario and Sonic at the Rio 2016 Olympic Games, and Mario and Sonic at the Olympic Games Tokyo 2020. We're not done yet, though. There are still more ups and downs to come in this Sonic saga, so click the video on screen to watch the 6th episode of the evolution of Sonic the Hedgehog.
I did it.
Following his surprise collaboration with Mario, Sonic appeared alongside and opposite many famous faces from various other franchises. At the same time, he continued to star in his own adventures across a range of genres. He's one hard-working hedgehog. This is the evolution of Sonic, Part 6. In 2007, fans of the Blue Blur were introduced to the Storybook series of games when Sonic and the Secret Rings was released for the Nintendo Wii. Formerly known by the working titles Sonic Wildfire and Sonic and the Secret of the Rings, it was the first 3D Sonic game since Sonic 3D Blast to feature our favorite hedgehog as the only playable character in story mode. Of course, several other characters appeared in the game, but many were completely new to the franchise. Some older faces did return to portray Arabian Nights characters, like Tails playing the role of Ali Baba, and Knuckles as Sinbad the Sailor. Funnily enough, they're recognized in-game by Sonic, but they do not recognize him in return.
Tails? What are you doing here, too?
My
My name is
superior.
Ali Baba.
The game kicks off when Shara, the genie of the ring, emerges from a book and into Sonic's world.
The blue hedgehog.
Huh? What the?
She reveals that an evil entity known as Eraser Jin from the world of Arabian Nights is absorbing the book's power and causing its pages and the world within to disappear. If he isn't stopped, his power will be unleashed onto the real world, unless the legendary blue hedgehog told of in the stories can stop him. I wonder who that could be referring to. Enemies described as spirits are scattered throughout the game, and each has different traits according to their color. For example, red enemies project fire. Some foes require Sonic to use a special skill in order to defeat them, and there are 104 skills available in total throughout the game. Players can complete the story in 10 to 15 hours, but those who want to unlock bonuses and all of the aforementioned skills can spend up to 30 hours doing so. While story mode is clearly the main focus, other game types such as adventure, party mode, and special book can be played. Party mode features mini-games, similar to those seen in Sonic Shuffle, whereas special book mode allows players to experience all of the bonuses unlocked by beating levels quickly. Unlockables include behind-the-scenes movies, cutscenes, video interviews, concept artwork, and music. Metacritic gave Sonic and the Secret Rings a score of 69. The game was a commercial success with 1.2 million copies sold, despite some critics not being a fan of the story and the game's tough controls. 2008 saw the sequel to Sonic Riders, subtitled Zero Gravity, a racing game for Wii and PlayStation 2 centered around a legendary artifact known as the Ark of the Cosmos. This mysterious item, which can control gravity, is coveted by both Sonic and the returning Babylon Rogues from the first game. How do they settle this dispute? By extreme gear competition, obviously. Similar to its predecessor in terms of overall gameplay, the addition of gravity control is a feature that lets players enter zero gravity so long as they have built up enough gravity points by performing tricks. By doing so, they can access previously inaccessible areas and shortcuts. Players can also use gravity control to maneuver around sharp corners more easily. Sonic Riders Zero Gravity received underwhelming reviews. Similar to the first Sonic Riders game, it received a score of 56 from Metacritic. And while the graphics were praised, the control scheme was despised, with critics describing a broken interface that rendered the game almost unplayable. A third game in the series titled Sonic Free Riders came out in November 2010, exclusively for the Xbox 360. It made use of the Kinect's motion sensor, and despite having great graphics and multiplayer options, it was again let down by poor controls. GameSpot said in their review, quote, "Lousy controls hinder almost every attempt Sonic Free Riders makes at being a fun racing game." It received a low score of 47 from Metacritic, making it one of the worst-rated Sonic games of all time. Perhaps in need of another leg up from his gaming counterparts, Sonic was included in a 2008 crossover fighting game called Super Smash Bros. Brawl. It was the third installment in the Super Smash Bros. Series and the first to feature third-party franchises. Sonic became an unlockable character who could be obtained in one of four ways. These methods involved beating the adventure mode known as Subspace Emissary, playing 300 matches of Brawl, playing a total of 10 hours of Brawl, or completing Classic Mode with 10 different characters. The other third-party character to be included was Solid Snake from the Metal Gear Solid games. One of the stages in Brawl is modeled after Green Hill Zone, Sonic's home stage, which is unlocked alongside the character. Alternative music for the stage can also be unlocked and used in custom stages. Green Hill Zone has a number of exclusive features, such as collapsible hillsides and star posts, which can be knocked around to inflict damage on opponents. Tails, Knuckles, and Silver all make cameo appearances in the background. Since his first appearance in Super Smash Bros. Brawl, Sonic has returned to appear in later Super Smash titles, such as the 2014 Super Smash Bros. For Nintendo 3DS and Wii U, plus Super Smash Bros. Ultimate in 2018 for the Nintendo Switch. Fun fact, unlocking Sonic in Super Smash Bros. Brawl was well worth the effort, even for non-fans of the spiky hero. That's because he was the fastest character in the game,
That's right.
taking over from Smash Bros. Captain Falcon. Sonic's final smash was also pretty epic, as he harnessed the power of the Chaos Emeralds to transform into Super Sonic, making him practically invincible and able to damage anything in his path. In September 2008, Sonic broke ground in the RPG genre by appearing in a role-playing game on Nintendo DS called Sonic Chronicles: The Dark Brotherhood. Developed by BioWare and published by Sega, it focused on events surrounding the kidnapping of Knuckles the Echidna and the disappearance of the Chaos Emeralds, which then led into a much larger story. The game was generally well received by critics, earning a score of 74 from Metacritic based on 54 reviews. Its in-game environments were described as bright, colorful, and cheery, undeniably nice-looking with slick presentation. The cutscenes were also said to be visually sharp. Chris Scullion of Official Nintendo Magazine called the game a fantastic Sonic game and a superb RPG game in its own right. The next major Hedgehog game to be published by Sega was Sonic Unleashed, which arrived at the end of 2008. Its story followed Sonic attempting to restore a world that had been split using the power of the Chaos Emeralds. Once again, thanks to good old Dr. Eggman. This task is made harder by the fact that Sonic occasionally transforms into a new form, that of Sonic the Werehog, due to energies generated by the corrupted Chaos Emeralds or Dark Diamond. A new sidekick named Chip also makes his debut in the game. Gameplay combines two main styles of play. First, the daytime stages are playable as Sonic and are reminiscent of the 3D and 2D side-scrolling platform levels seen in Sonic Rush and Sonic Rivals. Fast-paced action and lock-on mechanics for automatically targeting and hitting enemies return, while new features like Drift and Quick Step allow Sonic to slide around corners and dodge obstacles, respectively. Second are the 3D beat-em-up style stages that contain platforming and puzzle elements. These nighttime sections are when players play as Sonic the Werehog. The stages are much slower in comparison, and as a werehog, Sonic gains strength, allowing him to smash enemies and destructible environments. Meanwhile, stretchy arms let the werehog reach high platforms and perform special attacks. A port of Sonic Unleashed was made for the Nintendo Wii and the PlayStation 2. It was co-developed by the Osaka-based development studio known as DIS, and featured many differences compared to the PS3 and Xbox 360 version. While the story and its plot are identical, features such as awards, final bosses, and nighttime levels vary in terms of gameplay and appearance. If you don't know which one to choose, one Redditor's advice is, if you like daytime Sonic, go for the PS3 360 version. But if you like the Werehog, I'd recommend the Wii and PS2 versions, since the levels are shorter and the combat is streamlined. Critics tend to favor the PS2 port overall, though neither version received particularly impressive reviews. The PS3 version scored just 54 with Metacritic, while the PS2 version registered a slightly higher score of 66. 2009 saw Sonic & Company return to the Storybook series in a game titled Sonic and the Black Knight for the Nintendo Wii. The second entry in the series, after Sonic and the Secret Rings, this tale was set in the world of Camelot. As such, playable characters include Knights of the Round Table like Sir Galahad, Sir Lancelot, Sir Percival, and many others. Fittingly, a new form of Sonic is introduced too. Excalibur Sonic can be achieved with the magic of the 4 sacred swords. Gameplay combines Sonic's trademark speed platforming with a new sword fighting mechanic that utilizes the Wii's motion sensing functionality. This results in a play style similar to Legend of Zelda games like Twilight Princess and Skyward Sword. Most of the action takes place in 3D, but occasional 2D gameplay occurs when the camera shifts to a traditional side-scrolling perspective. Reviews of Sonic and the Black Knight were mixed, to say the least. Nintendo Power awarded it an 8 out of 10. stating the gameplay is pulled off in a fine fashion, whereas IGN gave a dismal 3.9 out of 10, because most of the dialogue is so badly written, and the camera proves downright obtrusive at points. A huge frustration. Based on 45 reviews, Metacritic recorded a review score of 55 for the game.
Sonic and Sega All-Stars Racing!
In 2010, Sonic was involved in yet another crossover series. Sonic and Sega All-Stars Racing was developed by Sumo Digital and released for the Wii, Nintendo DS, Xbox 360, PlayStation 3, and Microsoft Windows. A mobile version of the game was also developed by Gameloft, and an arcade version was released in March 2011. A kart racing game with over 20 playable characters from various Sega titles. Played similar to well-known racers like Mario Kart, with players collecting power-ups to boost their speed or hamper their opponents. As in Sega Superstars Tennis, each character has a star move unique to them that they can use against their opponents. Sonic, for example, can transform into Super Sonic using the Chaos Emeralds, and then perform a supersonic boost down the track, flipping any rival racer he comes close to. Tails can create a tornado using his plane, and Amy Rose can pull out her Pico Pico hammer to smash anyone unlucky enough to get in her way. Sega characters from outside the Sonic universe include the likes of Banjo-Kazooie, Alex Kidd, Ryo Hazuki from Shenmue, Beat from Jet Set Radio, BD Joe from Crazy Taxi, and others. Items known as capsule items, which can be picked up on the track and used against opponents, include Sonic's signature speed shoes, a mega horn that creates a destructive sound wave that flips rivals, and a confusing star, which targets the nearest rival and dazzles them by temporarily flipping their game screen upside down and spinning them out. Up to 4 players can play at once on split screen, and up to 8 players can compete on a single track online. Sonic and Sega All-Stars Racing received mostly positive reviews, registering a score of 78 with Metacritic. GameSpot gave the game an 8 out of 10, declaring that smooth controls and a bunch of awesome tracks make this an exciting kart racer. However, they weren't a fan of having cringe faces like Big the Cat in the game, calling their inclusion scraping the bottom of the barrel and looking for characters. Sonic and Sega All-Stars Racing was one of the best-selling and most profitable Sega games of 2010, having sold over 1 million copies by the end of that year. Fun fact, Knuckles' All-Star move is considered to be the most powerful of them all. If the player holds the required button long enough, his fist turns bright red and vibrates in a fast motion. Should the player let go at that point, it causes a devastating earthquake that knocks over every other opponent. In 2012, a sequel called Sonic and All-Stars Racing Transformed hit store shelves. As hinted by its title, the game involved a new transformation element. Players' cars could change into a plane when in the air and into a boat when on the water after passing through a transformation gate. In addition, the tracks themselves were transformed during the race. In Dragon Canyon, for instance, the bridges are destroyed by dragons in the track's third lap, requiring racers to switch to flight mode. Sonic and All-Stars Racing Transformed was deemed to be even more fun than its predecessor, scoring 82 on Metacritic. IGN gave it an 8.5 out of 10, calling it one of the better racing games of 2012, though still not as great as Mario Kart 7. Eurogamer, however, awarded a 9 out of 10 and said, "This manages to be more than just a tribute to the great and good of Sega's past. It does enough to earn its own place alongside them." Fun fact, many of the same faces returned for the sequel, but there were some interesting third-party characters. These included real-life racing car driver Danica Patrick, Wreck-It Ralph, and Simon from Yogscast. If you don't know about Yogscast, it's a pretty famous Minecraft commentary YouTube channel. Simon's inclusion was part of a promotional DLC for charity. Finally, a Sonic racing game series that was actually well received. A sign of things to come? Maybe. But let's just say Sonic started getting weirder in the 2010s. You'll see what I mean in Part 7. Click the video on screen and keep watching. Having gotten through his tricky teenage years with a little help from both friends and rivals, Sonic Team had no trouble keeping their #1 hedgehog in the public eye. The problem was that they still hadn't established a series of games as popular as the original 2D Sonic titles, which by now were almost 20 years old. Faced with the difficult task of where to go from here, the experiments continued. This is the evolution of Sonic the Hedgehog, Part 7. Catering to the wealth of fans who could never get enough of the classic style of Sonic gameplay, Sega released Sonic the Hedgehog 4, Episode 1 in October 2010. This marked a return to the original series of Sonic side-scrollers, which had ceased Sonic the Hedgehog 3 in 1994. Playable on the Xbox 360, PlayStation 3, Nintendo Wii, and iOS initially, Sonic the Hedgehog 4 Episode 1 was later ported to PC and Android in January 2012. The game picks up after the Angel Island incident, with Dr. Eggman's Death Egg finally destroyed and the Master Emerald safe. Sonic has said goodbye to Tails and Knuckles to explore new lands on his own, while Dr. Eggman has taken new measures to defeat the Hedgehog once and for all by upgrading his creations. As in the early Sonic games, the main objective is to speed through various acts in less than 10 minutes, collecting rings and racking up high scores before touching the end goal plate. Every fourth act, there's a boss to be defeated, after which the player opens a capsule. The secondary objective is to gather the 7 Chaos Emeralds by completing special stages. Collecting 50 rings in any of the first 2 acts of a zone, plus the giant ring at the end, earns the player entry to a special stage, similar to the ones from the original Sonic the Hedgehog. Only this time, the player can control the rotation of the stage rather than it being automatic. If you collect all 7 Chaos Emeralds, you can play as Super Sonic, collecting 50 rings. Considered a 2.5D side-scroller due to its updated graphics and modern-style Sonic, the gameplay is akin to the classic titles, except with the introduction of Sonic's homing attack, which some fans were not happy to see, as the move was first introduced in Sonic Adventure, and the classic 2D titles came long before it. Critics were also unhappy with the music, which featured low-quality synths and drum samples that didn't vary much between tracks. Despite those criticisms, Episode 1 received mostly positive reviews and a score of 81 on Metacritic. IGN awarded an 8 out of 10 alongside its Editor's Choice Award, describing it as short but sweet and well worth downloading. GamesRadar gave it a 9 out of 10 and called it deserving of the name Sonic the Hedgehog 4. Sonic the Hedgehog 4 Episode 2 was released in 2012, continuing the reboot with simple controls, zero voice acting, a focus on platforming, and momentum-based gameplay. It didn't fare as well as the first episode, however, receiving a score of just 63 on Metacritic. Lucas Sullivan from GamesRadar recounted their frustrations with it by saying, "Every time we felt like we were reliving our old Sonic glory days, the next stage would incorporate limp and uninspired gimmicks like shifting winds or avalanche snowboarding." Fun fact, players who owned both episodes of Sonic 4 could gain access to an additional episode called Episode Metal, where players could control Metal Sonic. Consoles detected progress through both games, and if the progression requirements were met, gamers could access Episode Metal as an extension of the Episode 2 world map. Wii fans were out of luck, though, since Episode 2 was never released on the Nintendo Wii.
That's right.
Owners would not have to miss out on Sonic for too long, as the next major title came in November 2010 with Sonic Colors. Developed for the Wii, an alternate version was released simultaneously for the Nintendo DS. The plot centered around Sonic and Tails investigating Dr. Eggman's incredible interstellar amusement park, which, of course, turns out to be a cover for his evil deeds. The Hedgehog and the Fox find out that Eggman has been dragging planets to Sonic's world from across the universe, kidnapping their inhabitants. Sonic must visit each of the planets and save them in order to disrupt Eggman's of different colors that act as power-ups. Sonic has the ability to use different color powers after encountering a wisp, and certain powers allow Sonic to progress via alternate paths to visit different worlds, like special rings and defeat enemies. Considered a return to form for modern Sonic games, Colors was praised for its visuals, sound, gameplay, and replay value. It was only seemingly let down by its difficulty and weak multiplayer. Metacritic holds a score of 78 for Sonic Colors, while IGN said at the time it might be the best Sonic game of this generation. It was a commercial success, too, with over 2 million copies sold. In September 2021, a remaster of the game titled Sonic Colors Ultimate was released. It featured enhanced visuals, refined controls, new gameplay elements, and the inclusion of the Jade. This mysterious creature allows Sonic to pass through walls and levitate like a ghost to reach new areas. Ultimate registered a score of 74, with many reviewers underwhelmed by the Jade Wisp and noting that the game failed to build much upon the original version. As Sonic turned 20 years old in 2011, the aptly named Sonic Generations was released for PlayStation 3, Xbox 360, and PC, plus another alternate version was developed for Nintendo's 3DS handheld. While celebrating his birthday in Generations, Sonic's friends are kidnapped by the Time Eater and become trapped in white space. It's therefore up to Sonic to explore white space, find his pals, defeat the Time Eater, and bring him home. In order to do so, Sonic teams up with a younger version of himself, Classic Sonic. Players take control of either modern or classic Sonic, and each has his own levels and abilities. There are 9 stages to play through, all based on different Sonic eras. There's the Classic era, which contains the Green Hill, Chemical Plant, and Sky Sanctuary stages. The Dreamcast era consists of Speed Highway, City Escape, and Seaside Hill. And then there's the modern era, made up of Crisis City, Rooftop Fun, and Panic Wisp. A new 30-second trial mode tested how far players could get in a stage within just half a minute, while a traditional time attack mode tested a player's best time completing stages in full. Music from past Sonic titles, a total of 50 songs, could be unlocked by completing challenge acts or collecting red star rings. Sonic Generations was notable for being the first game in the Sonic franchise to support stereoscopic 3D gameplay, with a 3D TV and 3D glasses required for those wanting to experience it. The game was a big hit with fans, selling over 3 million copies and becoming the 5th best-selling Sonic game at that time. IGN awarded it another of their Editor's Choice Awards, along with a score of 8.5 out of 10. Metacritic reported a score of 77 out of 100. Fun fact, in 2011, a creepypasta story appeared online about a teenager playing a heavily modified PC port of the original 1991 Sonic the Hedgehog game. The teen was said to have experienced disturbing paranormal episodes while playing. Then, in 2012, a game titled Sonic.exe was published by game jolt user MY5B Crimson based on the creepypasta, featuring a demonic version of Sonic with bloody eyes. He was certified Nightmare Fuel and became popular as one of the earliest Sonic memes. In 2012, a mobile game called Sonic Jump was released by Headlight Studio. A vertical platformer where the aim is to collect rings while jumping and bouncing to the highest level possible. Sonic Jump proved to be extremely popular, with over 8.8 million paid downloads on iOS alone by March 2013. Players could use the rings collected in their ring banks or use real money to purchase various in-game items like characters, power-ups, or wallpapers. The game scored a 77 on Metacritic. Another mobile game developed by Sega Hardlight and published by Sega in 2013 was Sonic Dash, an endless runner game similar to Temple Run. The player could take control of various Sonic characters and run across numerous series locations and fight bosses. Dash proved to be even more popular than Sonic Jump by a long way. In fact, Sonic Dash has gone on to become the most downloaded Sonic game ever. As of September 2021, it has been downloaded over 500 million times. It's surprising that Metacritic only scored Sonic Dash a 69 based on 29 reviews. But like most mobile games these days, the gripes were mainly with in-app purchases, which Destructoid described as ranging from not needed to pretty damn annoying. A sequel to Sonic Dash called Sonic Dash 2, Sonic Boom, came out in July 2015 for Android. It too received mixed reviews, registering a Metacritic score of 60. Speaking of Sonic Boom, that's the name of an animated TV series that started in 2014 and which the mobile sequel game was based on. A collaboration between Sega of America and Wii U Productions from France. The show is loosely based on the video game franchise. Sonic Boom is the fifth animated series in this regard and the second developed by Sega following Sonic X. New characters such as Styx the Badger make their debut in the show, which is set on Seaside Island in and around the Hedgehog Village. A familiar tale sees Sonic, Tails, Knuckles, and the gang face off against perennial foe Dr. Eggman and his robot henchmen. Common Sense Media gave Sonic Boom 4 out of 5 stars. The show later won the award for Best Animation at the 2017 Chico Independent Film Festival. Also in 2017, Film Chilla awarded Sonic Boom with Best Series. A number of video games tied in with the release of Sonic Boom in 2014. There was an action-adventure game for the Wii U titled Sonic Boom, Rise of Lyric, and a 2.5D side-scrolling adventure platformer for the Nintendo 3DS called Sonic Boom, Shattered Crystal. Both games focused on exploration, but whereas Rise of Lyric had platforming elements and a beat-em-up style, Shattered Crystal was more about platforming and puzzle solving. Both games were severely criticized, with Rise of Lyric receiving an awful 32 on Metacritic and Shattered Crystal scoring 47. Rise of Lyric even became the worst-rated Sonic title. IGN gave the game a 4.3 out of 10 and said in their review, its exploration is so-so, its brawling is tedious, its characters are annoying, and the only stages where it feels like a Sonic game are the ones most likely to suffer technical problems. ZTGD gave their advice by saying, just stay far, far away from this toxic hedgehog. A third Boom game based on Fire and Ice was released in 2016 for the 3DS. It was a 2.5D side-scrolling action-adventure platform game developed by Sanzaru Games and published by Sega. The game's plot follows Sonic and friends as they attempt to save the world by closing dangerous features created by Dr. Eggman's Ragnium mining operations. All playable characters could use fire and ice mechanics to transform the game's levels. And there is a multiplayer racing mode called Spot Racing. Sonic Boom, Fire and Ice fared better than other Boom games, scoring 62 Metacritic. James Wayne praised it as a huge improvement over Shattered Crystal, while Mike Fahey of Kotaku admired mixing the wit and charm of the cartoon with the speed and simplicity of old-school Sonic games. Fun fact, some interesting arcade games and attractions centered around the Sonic franchise were featured in Japan in 2013. Sonic Athletics was an arcade game played with a treadmill of up to 8 players. Sonic Ghost Shooting was an interactive dark ride where players used light guns to shoot as many ghosts as possible. And Sonic Brain Ranking invited up to 10 players to ask and answer miscellaneous trivia while up in an area resembling Green Hill Zone. Sonic Lost World was a 3D platforming game exclusively for the Nintendo Wii U, released in October 2013, with a 3DS version launched on the same day. Interestingly, the Wii U version was published by Sega in Japan and America, but by Nintendo in Europe and Australia. In the game, Sonic is tasked with stopping the Deadly Six, an alien tribe that seeks to siphon the world's energy from the Lost Heads, which serves as the game's setting. Gameplay is a combination of 2D and 3D shifting perspectives that incorporate past Sonic games, spin dash, bounce jump, and super heal out. Improved focused homing attack is introduced, as well as a parkour system for getting past obstacles and running on walls. Color powers return and are expanded on Sonic Colors and Generations, as well as Red Star Rings, which can be collected and used to unlock additional content. The new version contains competitive and cooperative multiplayer, but no online multiplayer. The reception to Sonic Lost World was mixed, resulting in a score of 63 for Metacritic. Its visuals were highly commended, with Chris Plant and Polygon calling it arguably the best in the series. However, the new parkour mechanic is deemed failure, as Game Informer's Tim Curry attested to, saying he never got a good feel for the rhythm of wall running and jumping, and felt rushed to pass sections where it was forced. Regardless, Lost World sold fairly well, achieving combined sales of more than 900,000 units. Fun fact, Supersonic Special Number 9, published by Archie Comics, contains a prequel to Lost World written by Ian Flynn. 20 pages long, it's the longest game adaptation featured in Archie Comics to date. Flynn stated that the story would become canon for later Sonic the Hedgehog Archie Comics. February 2015, mobile gamers in Japan and Canada could download a new Sonic title, Sonic Runners. The game was released worldwide on Android and iOS in June 2015. A side-scrolling platformer, Sonic Runners has been downloaded more than 6 million times by December that same year. Once again, the actual gameplay was praised. The game was severely let down by the presence of constant ads, a pay-to-win system, and poor load times. This resulted in a score of 51 on Metacritic. The game's servers were closed in July 2016. The title was pulled from store apps. A sequel called Sonic Runners Adventure appeared in 2017 and scored much more favorably, Metacritic registering a respectable 78. Sonic Runners Adventure was met with generally favorable reviews. Carter Dodson of Touch Arcade was pleased that the game had a fixed price, rather than the freemium mechanics seen in its predecessor. Meanwhile, Christine Chan of App Advice enjoyed the game's retro feel and bright and lush environments that invoked the addictive sense of Sonic nostalgia. We've almost caught up with current-day Sonic, so make sure you join me for the final stages of his evolution by clicking the video on screen. Thanks for watching. Now that Sega and Sonic Team had finally found a happy middle ground between giving fans the nostalgia they crave and trying out new ideas, interest in these heroic hedgehogs is beginning to heat up again. The direction and some of the creative decisions were still questionable, to say the least, but Sonic's revival introduced him to a new generation of fans. This is the evolution of Sonic the Hedgehog, Part 8. 2016 marked the 25th anniversary of the very first Sonic the Hedgehog game. To celebrate this milestone, Sega announced 2 new projects, Sonic Mania and Sonic Forces. Mania was the first to release digitally for PC, PS4, Xbox One, and the Nintendo Switch in August 2017. A 2D side-scroller that closely resembles the earliest Sonic titles. Mania is set in an alternate reality that follows Sonic, Tails, and Knuckles as they try to prevent Dr. Eggman and his robot minions, the hard-boiled heavies, from harnessing a mysterious source of unspeakable power. 8 of the game's 13 zones are remasters from previous titles, including Green Hill Zone, Chemical Plant Zone, and Hydrocity Zone, while 5 zones are completely original. Mini-bosses await the player at the end of Act 1 in each zone, while main bosses appear after every Act 2. Special stages are entered via hidden that appears over star posts at certain points. Reminiscent of the special stages from Sonic the Hedgehog 3 and Sonic & Knuckles, the player must collect blue spheres and earn silver or gold medallions based on their performance. Should you collect all 7 Chaos Emeralds in Sonic Mania, you can then enter a Super State when playing in Mania mode, meaning you can play as Super Sonic, Super Tails, or Super Knuckles, and blitz through the stages with extra speed, higher jumps, and invulnerability. Being in your Super State burns rings though, so once your rings run out, the Super State will end. Sonic Mania is not considered by Sega to be a remake, but a new game entirely, designed to emulate the style and gameplay of the 2D classics. Christian Whitehead, who had previously worked on enhanced ports of Sonic games, helped to develop Mania, alongside Headcanon and Pagoda West Games, who've been heavily involved in the fan game community. Fans and critics loved it. It rapidly became the best-selling Sonic game in 15 years and was considered by many to be among the best of the 2D platformers. Metacritic recorded a very impressive score of 86, and the game resulted in a significant boost to Sega's profits. Twinfinite and IGN awarded Sonic Mania their Best of E3 2017 accolades, and Curse Network awarded it their Most Likely to Inspire a Completion Run award. Meanwhile, Electronic Gaming Monthly described Sonic Mania as one of the purest, most enjoyable Sonic games, and said, "The question isn't if this experiment in reviving classic Sonic is successful or not. The question is, what happens next?" A definitive version of the game, titled Sonic Mania Plus, came out in July 2018, and an Encore DLC was launched alongside a physical version of the game. Mighty the Armadillo and Ray the Flying Squirrel were added as playable characters in Sonic Mania Plus, as well as a 4-player competition mode. Fun fact, to promote the collector's edition of Sonic Mania, a mock infomercial was released that closely referenced a similar comedic advert for Sonic the Hedgehog 2 back in 1993. The fake suggested price of $6,231,991 seen in the Mania infomercial is also a reference to the North American release date of the original Sonic the Hedgehog game, June 23rd, 1991. The second game announced as part of Sonic's 25th anniversary celebration, Sonic Forces, came out in November 2017. Released on PC and for the same consoles as Sonic Mania, it was developed by Sonic Team. It follows our spiky protagonist as he joins up with a resistance force to take back the planet from, who else? Dr. Eggman. The game also introduced a new villain, a masked jackal mercenary known as Infinite. As seen in Sonic Generations, gameplay switches between classic Sonic and modern Sonic, although the addition of an avatar character offers a third gameplay style, with the custom-created avatar able to use a grappling hook and traverse platforms and attack enemies. There are different animal species available to choose from for the avatar, and which one the player opts for decides the unique ability they get in-game. For example, birds can perform double jumps, cats hold on to some rings even after taking damage, dogs restart with rings after a KO, and rabbits have extended invincibility after they've been hit. Despite this interesting concept, Sonic Forces was poorly received. It received a score of just 57 according to Metacritic. While the game's graphics were praised, repetitive boss fights and gameplay that had mostly been seen in previous titles did little to advance the Sonic series. Polygon awarded a 5 out of 10 for those reasons, and also disliked that the game's ranking system encouraged players to finish as quickly as possible rather than explore stages for collectibles. Sega did receive a pat on the back from the International Business Times for trying to please new fans with Forces and old fans with Mania, boosting the game publisher's reputation in hopes of a Sonic renaissance. Even though Sega claims that Sonic Forces performed strongly in terms of sales, the fact that a discounted Sonic Forces loose price version was later released wasn't exactly a good look. A mobile game titled Sonic Force Speed Battle was released in the same month as the PC and console versions, but fared much better. Its gameplay was similar to that seen in the Sonic Dash mobile game, but instead of being an endless runner, it pits players players against each other in real time to see who can complete a random track in the fastest time. Sonic Forces Speed Battle holds a meta score of 71. On September 30th, 2021, the game passed the 100 million download mark.
I did it.
According to Rick Cowley of Pocket Gamer, Sonic Forces Speed Battle is a lot of fun to play, but there's a ton of grinding before you open up new levels. 2018 was a big year for fans of Sonic cartoons and comics, tying in with the success of Sonic Mania and the existence of Sonic Forces, a 2D animated mini-series titled Sonic Mania Adventures to play for free on Sonic the Hedgehog's official YouTube channel. The story picks up just after the conclusion of Sonic Forces and adopts the viewpoint of classic Sonic, who has just returned to his own world. The series was written and directed by Tyson Hess, and interestingly features no dialogue. Instead, the plot develops using visual clues. There are 5 episodes plus a special episode. The series is watched by millions of people. In fact, the compilation of all episodes has almost 100 million views. IDW Publishing released their first issue of Sonic the Hedgehog the comic book in 2018, carrying on from the Archie Comics series of the same name. Heavily inspired by the video game universe, the comics see Sonic and Tails constantly facing along with bad news. This particular series kicks off with the protagonist dealing with the aftermath of Dr. Eggman's most recent attempt at world domination, as seen in the Sonic Forces game. In December 2018, a one-shot comic book special was released by IDW Publishing titled Sonic Team Racing. It acts as a prequel to the video game of the same name that was released the following year. A 2D animated series called Team Sonic Racing Overdrive was also uploaded to the official YouTube channel in 2019 as a promotion for the game. Just like the Sonic Mania Adventures cartoon, the episodes are conveyed without dialogue. Fun fact, a lot of crazy stuff has happened in Sonic TV shows and comics, including Great War. Based on the conflict briefly mentioned in the 1993 Sonic the Hedgehog TV show, the 5-year battle between Overlanders and Mobians is chronicled in the Archie comics. Sonic is revealed to have been born during the early days of the Great War, whereas Tails was born 5 years later. This places the Great War between the years 3220 and 3225. Julian Kintobor plays a big role in the war, even becoming a warlord. Who is Julian Kintobor? Reverse the letters in his last name and you get, yep, it's him. Robotnik, a.k.a. Dr. Eggman. Team Sonic Racing, the video game, became available to play on PC and consoles in May 2019. Developed by Sumo Digital, who worked on previous Sonic racing titles such as Sonic and Sega All-Stars Racing, this newer title features characters solely from the Sonic universe. In the game, Sonic's been taken to another world and entered into a race unlike any other. With a little help from his friends, Tails and Knuckles, he'll race to win the competition and get everyone home. A kart racing game similar to past titles, Team Sonic Racing set itself apart by zeroing in on the team aspect. The player competes as part of a team of racers, and the way to win involves efficiency and teamwork, as opposed to just speed. There's still a fast-paced, competitive quality to the game, but it features arcade-style elements as well. Gameplay is in a third-person view, as players can perform tricks, drift, and collect power-ups. A variety of game modes allow players to compete for points, take part in time trials, run custom races, or complete a story-based campaign. There are 15 Sonic characters to choose from, and everyone is assigned to one of 3 racing classes: speed, technique, or power, which determines abilities, advantages, or disadvantages while on the track. Team Sonic Racing was warmly received and registered a score of 73 on Metacritic. IGN gave it an 8.5 out of 10. It praised the new team system, calling it a fantastic evolution of the arcade racing formula that gives you a real reason to to work together. In December 2018, an official poster appeared for a Sonic the Hedgehog movie and kicked off what is perhaps the most bizarre chapter yet in Sonic's long and storied history. We'll feature more. Hit the video on screen to watch the final episode of Sonic the Hedgehog. Sonic the Hedgehog means many different things to many different people. For the older generation, his name evokes feelings of nostalgia, the glory days of 2D side-scrolling action. For younger fans, it might just be another weird internet meme, or depending on which game you played or shows you watched growing up, he could be the coolest or lamest hedgehog ever. In 2019, though, something happened that would make all Sonic fans and critics see him in an entirely new way, both literally and figuratively. Oh, and there is more. In 2022, Sonic's first open world game was released. This is the evolution of Sonic, Part 1. In February 2018, Sega and Paramount released a joint statement announcing that a Sonic the Hedgehog movie would be coming to theaters in November 2019.
So, here we are again. We've been through so much together. Now you understand why there's a psychotic robot doctor chasing a supersonic blue hedgehog. Want to know how it ends? Yeah, me too.
With stars James Marsden and Jim Carrey joining the cast in May, and the voice of Sonic to be played by Ben Schwartz. Fans of the franchise were optimistic. That was until December, when a silhouetted teaser poster for the movie was released. PC Gamer reported on it with the headline, "The first Sonic the Hedgehog live-action movie poster is creepy as hell." Cautious optimism persisted until March 2019, when official movie posters were leaked, showing bizarre human-like legs covered in blue fur, wearing blue sneakers. People took to Twitter to voice their displeasure and to post the first of many memes surrounding the movie. Even the former lead programmer of Sonic video games, Yuji Naka, got involved, saying, "I feel like with this Sonic here, visually, the important thing is to look at the head and body ratio and the roundness of the abdomen. I wonder if they couldn't have balanced them a little better." When the first official movie trailer was released in April 2019, everyone's worst fears were confirmed. The YouTube video, which, funnily enough, can no longer be found on Paramount's channel, received 18.6 million views in its first 2 days, but was disliked hundreds of thousands of times. Sonic had been turned into a horrible human-hedgehog hybrid, and the new design was universally hated. The following month, the movie's director, Jeff Fowler, wrote on Twitter, "The message is loud and clear. If you aren't happy with the design, you want changes. It's going to happen." The movie's release date was pushed back to February 14, 2020, and longtime Sonic fan and animator Tyson Hess was brought on board to fix the disastrous character design. By the time the second trailer was released in November 2019, Sonic was looking much more like his Sega self. As for Yuji Naka's verdict on the redesign, he said, "The design is more Sonic-like now that he's wearing gloves. However, his eyes still aren't joined together. As expected, I can't help but feel weird about that one point. But I'm looking forward to it." 3 months later, it finally happened. Sonic made it to the big screen. Set in the small town of Green Hills, the Blue Blur finds himself partnering up with a local police officer who helps him evade capture and defend the planet from an evil genius called Dr. Robotnik. Sonic the Hedgehog received a lukewarm reception from fans and critics, getting an average score of 6.5 out of 10 on IMDb from over 135,000 views. The film was a commercial success, though, grossing $319.7 million worldwide, in comparison to its budget of around $85 to $90 million. It went on to become the 6th highest grossing film of 2020 and took the top superhero movie slot that year, putting an end to a 10-year-long reign of Marvel films. Fun fact, the original Sonic design seen in the movie's teaser trailer would go on to spawn many internet memes and became known as Ugly Sonic. Ugly Sonic did eventually make it into cinemas too, albeit in a cameo.